I never thought I'd break the rules at 72 until the night I buried a boy in my garden. My name is Martha Clay, and I've lived a quiet life in White Hollow where nothing ever happens. Until it does. It started with a knock during a storm, a shivering boy asking to use the phone. I let him in. He never left. What followed was a week of secrets, shadows, and a truth no one would believe. But I lived it, and now I'm telling you, because sometimes the wildest stories don't start with monsters. Sometimes they start with kindness. You don't expect anything strange to happen when you're 72, and your biggest thrill is watching squirrels raid your bird feeder. But life, as I've learned, doesn't care about your expectations. It was a Tuesday, Bridge Day. Normally, I'd be at the community centre, sipping lukewarm coffee and arguing with Doris March over whether I really did underbid my hand. But rain had flooded the back roads, and I wasn't about to hydroplane just for cards and cookies. So instead, I was home, wrapped in Leonard's old sweater, sipping Earl Grey, and listening to the soft patter of rain against my windows. Then came the knock. Not a bang, not urgent, just hesitant. Like whoever was outside wasn't sure they should be there at all. I paused. Who knocks in a downpour? Everyone in White Hollow knows you don't drop by unannounced unless you've baked something or you're lost. I set down my mug and opened the door. And there he was, a boy, couldn't have been older than 12 or 13, hair dark and dripping, stuck to his forehead, clothes soaked straight through baggy jeans, a jacket 2 sizes too big, and no backpack. His lips were blue with cold, and his shoes squelched when he shifted his weight. "Can I use your phone?" he asked. His voice was soft, cracking, like it hadn't been used much lately. I looked at him, really looked. He was trembling, eyes darting around, watching the road behind him more than me. That old protective instinct, long dormant since my boys grew up, lit up in my chest like a firecracker. "Come in before you freeze to death," I said. He hesitated just a second, then stepped inside. I wrapped him in one of Leonard's cardigans, the beige one with the wooden buttons he used to wear when we'd pick apples in fall. It hung off the boy like a tent. I made him tea, though he didn't touch it. Just sat on the edge of the couch, legs pulled close, staring at the carpet like it held secrets. "What's your name, honey?" I asked. He glanced up, eyes wide and old beyond his years. "Noah." "Noah." I repeated it softly. "That's a good, strong name." He nodded once. I handed him the phone. He held it, turned it in his hands, then set it down gently. "Don't remember the number," he muttered. "Parents' number." He didn't answer, just looked down again. I didn't press. Something in my gut told me the truth would come out when it was ready, and not a minute before. "You can rest a while if you need to," I said. "Guest room's down the hall. Sheets are clean." He looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, "Thank you." And just like that, the storm outside seemed quieter. I had no idea then how far from normal my life was about to drift, but something inside me already knew. The boy wasn't just lost, he was running, and trouble was still out there in the rain. Noah slept for nearly 12 hours. I checked on him once in the night, cracked the door just enough to see him curled up like a kitten, clutching Leonard's cardigan like it was the last warm thing left in the world. His shoes were neatly placed beside the bed. That was the first thing I noticed about him. He was careful, every movement precise, quiet, like he was trying not to exist too loudly. In the morning, I made oatmeal with brown sugar and raisins. He didn't say much when he came to the table, just gave a faint "thank you" and ate like someone who hadn't had a real meal in days. "Feel any warmer today?" I asked, trying to keep it light. He nodded. "Yeah, thanks." We didn't talk much that day. He followed me out to the garden and helped pull weeds without being asked. When I brought him lemonade, he mumbled a polite thanks again and kept working. Not once did he complain, and he didn't check his phone, didn't even have one. That struck me as odd. I don't know a single boy his age who isn't glued to a screen. But Noah, he seemed almost relieved to be unplugged. Later that afternoon, I caught him watching the trees behind the house. He was still, hands gripping the porch railing, eyes scanning the pines like they were holding their breath. That same wary look he'd had when I opened the door the night before. "You expecting someone?" I asked gently. I let it go. That evening, I made grilled cheese and tomato soup. He sat at the table like it was a dinner party, back straight, hands folded until I served him. That's when I noticed something else. His wrists were too thin, like he'd grown faster than he was fed. The cardigan sleeves slid down over his hands. After dinner, he helped with dishes. Didn't wait to be asked. He nodded. Depends what kind. That night, he went to bed without needing to be told. No screen time, no fuss. Just said good night and closed the door softly behind him. I sat in the living room, staring at the flames in the fireplace, wondering what kind of child runs into the woods in the middle of a storm, wondering what kind of home he was running from. The house was quiet, but not empty. Noah was still just a guest, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't just housing a stranger, I was watching over something delicate, and somehow I knew deep in the bones that had rocked babies and buried a husband that whatever had chased Noah into my life wasn't finished. Not yet. 3 days passed. Noah settled into the rhythm of the house like a shadow that had always been there, quiet, helpful, invisible unless you looked close. He never said where he came from, never asked for anything, but every night, before bed, he'd double-check the locks on every window and door. Once I asked if he was afraid of someone. He just shrugged. Not afraid, just careful. Still, a strange tension hovered around him like dust in sunlight, always shifting, never quite still. It was a Saturday night. I remember because I'd just finished watching one of those old crime dramas Leonard used to love, grey-haired detectives solving everything with clever words and whiskey. The kind of show that makes you think the world can still be put right with a good heart and a little persistence. I was rinsing my mug when headlights slashed through the dark and lit up the kitchen. I moved to the front window and peered through the lace curtain. A car sat at the gate. Not one of those rusty pickups the neighbours drove, but something sleek and black, low to the ground, humming like a beast too well fed to roar. The man who stepped out was tall, too tall, and dressed like he'd just stepped out of a boardroom. His coat was spotless, boots polished, even though the road was still muddy from last night's rain. He walked slowly up the path, not rushed, not hesitant, just inevitable. He didn't come all the way to the porch, just stood at the gate and looked at the house like it was something beneath him. "Evening, Ma'am," he called. His voice was pleasant enough, soft, but cold too, like polished marble. "I believe a boy may have wandered onto your property a few days ago, about yay-high, dark hair, looks lost." He didn't say missing. He didn't ask if he was okay. I stepped out onto the porch, shotgun in hand, unloaded, but he didn't need to know that. "There's no boy here," I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mind if I check?" "I do, actually," I replied. "You're trespassing, and I've got a bad hip and a worse temper." He tilted his head, watching me, studying. I had the strangest sense that he wasn't seeing an old woman. He was calculating something, weighing value. The engine purred as he pulled away. I stayed on the porch until the red of his tail lights was long gone. Then I went inside and locked every door twice. When I turned around, Noah was standing at the top of the stairs, pale and silent. "They found me," he said, and just like that, I knew the quiet wasn't safety. After that night, the house didn't feel the same. It wasn't just the memory of that man at the gate. It was the way the air changed, thicker somehow, still, like the walls themselves were listening. I didn't ask Noah who they were, not yet. He'd already said more than I expected, and I could tell from the way his shoulders stayed tight and his eyes stayed low that questions wouldn't help him talk, just drive him deeper inside himself. The old radio on my kitchen shelf, the one I kept for weather alerts and baseball games, started acting strange. It would crackle at random times, midnight, 3 a.m, middle of breakfast. Once I turned it off, only to hear a whisper just before the dial clicked. I told myself it was the rain in the wires, maybe a bad signal, but I knew better. I've lived in that house for over 40 years. I know what's normal. Then there were the footprints. I woke one morning and opened the front door to find muddy prints, bare feet, long and narrow, leading up the porch steps, only they weren't going toward the door. They were going away from it. Noah was still asleep in the guest room, curled in a tight ball under a pile of quilts. I checked his feet, clean, dry. He hadn't been outside. I didn't say anything, not then. I just made breakfast like nothing had changed and watched him over the rim of my mug. Later that afternoon, I found him in the backyard again, staring at the tree line. "They don't knock again," he said softly, not turning. "Next time, they come through." "Who are they, Noah?" "Not people. Not anymore." That night, I took Leonard's shotgun down from the mantel. It hadn't been fired since 1989, when we chased a fox out of the chicken coop, but the shells were still in the tin box beneath the pantry floor. Leonard was a cautious man, always said, "It's not about fear, it's about readiness." As I loaded it, my hand shook, not from the weight of the weapon, but from the realization that something I couldn't name had taken notice of us. And it wasn't going to knock politely next time. It was going to come in. The storm rolled in like it had a purpose. It wasn't gentle or quiet like the rain from days before. This one came fast, fierce, shaking the window panes like fists pounding to be let in. Thunder cracked overhead, and every bolt of lightning lit the house like a camera flash, brief glimpses of a world turning unfamiliar. The lights flickered once, then twice, then went out. I lit candles from the drawer beside the sink, hands steady despite the pounding of my heart. Shadows danced across the walls like they were alive. I checked the locks again, even though I knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever was coming wasn't going to ask permission this time. Noah appeared in the hallway, silent, barefoot, holding that old sci-fi paperback I'd given him days ago. His eyes reflected the candlelight like mirrors. "They're here," he said. I nodded once, grabbed the shotgun, and motioned him toward the cellar. Just before we reached the cellar door, something slammed against the porch. A heavy, deliberate thud, not the wind, not debris, something with weight. Then another, that same soft marble cold tone from the man at the gate. "I know you're inside. You've been very kind, but the boy doesn't belong to you." Noah froze on the stairs. I stepped in front of him. "You come one step closer and you'll find out what 12-gauge buckshot feels like," I called back. "You're protecting something dangerous," the voice replied. "Funny. That's what I thought about you." The porch groaned. Something walked across it, slow, scraping steps. "Noah," I whispered, "down the stairs, now." We bolted into the cellar, slamming the door behind us just as the windows upstairs shattered. Wind screamed into the house, but I knew it wasn't just wind. I dragged the old oak dresser across the door. My breath came fast and shallow. Above us, footsteps moved through the house. They weren't searching. They were coming. Noah stood in the middle of the cellar, arms wrapped around himself, shivering. "They'll tear it all apart," he whispered. "They'll find me. Unless..." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something I hadn't seen before. A silver locket, old, tarnished, pulsing with a faint blue glow. "They want this," he said. "If they get it, they bind me again, lock me back in the dark. A seal, a prison, a promise." He looked at me with eyes too ancient for his face. I didn't ask to be made, but I chose to run. The cellar door groaned under pressure. Splintering, they were breaking through. "I have to end this," he said, voice trembling. "No." I grabbed his wrist. "You're just a boy." He looked up at me, calm now. Then he opened the locket, and the whole world changed. The moment Noah opened the locket, the candlelight went still, like the air itself had frozen to watch. Then the glow erupted. It wasn't fire or lightning. It was pure, a blinding blue-white that radiated outward like a silent scream. It didn't light the cellar. It cleansed it, sweeping away the cold, the dark, the fear. The sound of breaking wood stopped. The voices above, hissing, whispering, snarling, fell silent. Noah stood in the center of it all, still and small, the locket floating between his hands. His face was calm, too calm, the expression of someone who had already accepted the price of what came next. I wanted to stop it, to reach for him, but I couldn't move. The light pinned me like gravity. Then with a roar that seemed to come from inside the walls, the cellar ceiling shook, dust rained down, and something above let out a sound like metal, tearing and flesh burning at once. The shadows were screaming, and then they weren't. The light flared again, blinding, electric. I shut my eyes, feeling heat like summer sun on my face. And when I opened them again, silence. But Noah. The locket lay beside him, the glow now soft and fading like a dying ember. His face was pale, lips cracked, eyes fluttering. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Didn't want to bring them here, just needed to feel safe." "You were safe," I said, brushing his hair back. "You still are." He tried to smile, but his body shook with exhaustion. I held him tighter, ignoring the way his skin felt cold through Leonard's cardigan. "They'll never take you," I promised. "Not while I'm breathing." "You don't have to fight anymore," he murmured. "It's over." He took one last breath, deep and shaky. Noah's eyes didn't close. They just stopped seeing. The silence in the house was no longer fearful. It was sacred, heavy with what had happened, what had ended. Eventually, I carried him upstairs. He was so light. I wrapped him in the cardigan and placed him on the couch. The storm never returned. No thunder, no wind, no broken glass, just peace. But my heart, it cracked open in a way it hadn't even when Leonard died. Because love is strange like that. You don't have to know someone long to know they were meant to matter. And Noah, he mattered. So I did what I had to do, the only thing that made sense. I dug a grave under the daffodils, and I buried him at sunrise. I buried Noah as the sky turned gold behind the trees. The daffodils, those early bloomers Leonard loved, were just starting to peek through the soil. I dug between them gently, as if the earth itself deserved respect for what it was about to hold. Noah looked peaceful, like a boy who'd finally outrun the things chasing him. I wrapped him in the cardigan, the one that had warmed him that first night. I laid the locket on his chest, not glowing anymore, just silver and quiet. Then I covered him with the soil, layer by layer, whispering small things between each shovel of earth, things a mother might say. "You're safe now. You did good, sweetheart. You mattered." By the time I finished, the sun had climbed over the ridge and filled the yard with a light too soft for what I'd just done. I didn't mark the grave with a stone, didn't tell anyone. He was something I would carry. I went back inside. The kitchen smelled like burnt candle wax and wood smoke. The radio sat silent. The windows were still shattered, but the house felt calm. I cleaned. Not because I had to, but because it felt right. The way we clean after a storm, or a funeral, or after company leaves, and you're left sitting with the echoes of everything they brought in. The shotgun went back over the mantel, unfired since that final night. The shells went back in the pantry floor tin. I didn't know if I'd ever need them again. but I didn't throw them out either. That night, the cat returned, as if checking in, as if she knew. The daffodils bloomed, taller and brighter than ever before, brighter than any I'd seen in my life. Neighbours stopped by to comment on them. "Whatever you're feeding those flowers, Martha," one of them laughed, "send me the recipe." But I never gave it. Because some things aren't meant to be shared. Some things bloom because they're standing over a promise kept. Not to the bridge ladies, not to the clerk at the post office, not to the priest I hadn't visited in 10 years. But I thought of him every time the wind stirred the trees, every time the static tickled the edge of the radio dial, every time the shadows in the hallway stretched just a bit too long before snapping back to normal. He had ended it, stopped them from ever taking another like him. But I'd lived through it. Sometimes final stands don't end in fanfare. Sometimes they end in silence. And flowers. The neighbours still waved from their porches. The mail still came at 11:17 every morning. I still made oatmeal every Sunday and sat on the porch with my crossword puzzle and tea, just like I had for years. But inside the house, nothing was the same. And the garden changed. The daffodils didn't just bloom, they thrived. Twice the size, thick green stems, gold petals so bright they looked painted. And they didn't die back like they were supposed to. Even as April passed into May and other spring flowers faded, the daffodils held on, like they refused to let go of the space he'd been given. Children from down the lane came by to see them. "Martha's got magic soil," one of them whispered, grinning up at me as I handed out lemonade. "These flowers are glowing." I just smiled and nodded, let them think it was magic. Maybe it was. I never saw the black car again, never heard from the man in the long coat or any of the shadows that had hunted Noah. Whatever he'd done when he opened that locket, whatever that final burst of light had burned away, stayed gone. But part of me kept waiting, watching. Each morning I'd stand at the kitchen sink, looking out over the garden, the tree-lined, the edge of the world where I'd once seen headlights appear like ghosts. And sometimes I'd speak, just softly, just enough for the wind to carry it. "You're safe, sweetheart." I remember. I'll never forget. One evening, just before dusk, I sat on the porch with my tea and watched the light dance across the daffodils. The air was warm, still, peaceful, and then a flicker. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but no, it was movement, just beyond the flowers. A shimmer in the shape of a boy, wrapped in a too-big cardigan. He didn't say anything, just stood there. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just lifted my hand in a soft wave, and he did the same. Then he faded, like breath on glass. Gone, but not lost. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because I knew. The world may never know who Noah was, may never believe what came to my house that stormy week, and I'd buried not just a boy, but the weight he carried, not in shame. The earth held him now, and I held the memory. Some things deserve to rest in peace, and some things deserve to bloom. Summer came, long and golden, with the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer above the roads. The daffodils finally faded, but they didn't vanish. Their leaves remained green, well past their season, like they were waiting for something. I went about my life. I planted tomatoes. I restocked the pantry. I even started going to bridge again. Doris March still accused me of sandbagging, and I let her. But every now and then the world would shift, a flicker on the edge of my vision, a breeze that carried the faintest sound of laughter when no one was around, a light tap on the porch steps when I knew no one had knocked, and once, just after sunset, the radio turned on by itself. Static at first, then soft and low music. A lullaby I didn't recognize, but felt like I should. I stood still in the kitchen, not afraid, just listening, my hands in the dishwater, eyes fixed on the old dial. Then, as suddenly as it came, it faded. The room felt warmer after that. like something had visited. I never told anyone, not about the music, the boy, the shadows, or the locket. What could I say? That a child arrived during a storm and saved the world by dying quietly beneath my daffodils? No. This wasn't a story for the world. It was a story for me. For us. But people did start talking, not about ghosts or boys, but about me. They noticed how much time I spent in the garden, how I stopped going to church, but started showing up at the library on Thursdays, asking about ancient folklore and old world myths. And the garden? Oh, the garden changed. The daffodils didn't just bloom, they thrived, twice the size. Thick green stems, gold petals so bright they looked painted, and they didn't die back like they were supposed to. Even as April passed into May and other spring flowers faded, the daffodils held on, like they refused to let go of the space he'd been given. Children from down the lane came by to see them. "Martha's got magic soil," one of them whispered, grinning up at me as I handed out lemonade. "These flowers are glowing." I just smiled and nodded. Let them think it was magic. Maybe it was. I never saw the black car again, never heard from the man in the long coat or any of the shadows that had hunted Noah. Whatever he'd done when he opened that locket, whatever that final burst of light had burned away, stayed gone, but part of me kept waiting, watching. Each morning I'd stand at the kitchen sink, looking out over the garden, the tree line, the edge of the world where I'd once seen headlights appear like ghosts. And sometimes I'd speak, just softly, just enough for the wind to, "You're safe, sweetheart." I remember. I'll never forget. One evening, just before dusk, I sat on the porch with my tea and watched the light dance across the daffodils. The air was warm, still, peaceful, and then a flicker. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but no. It was movement, just beyond the flowers. A shimmer in the shape of a boy, thin, small, wrapped in a too big cardigan. He didn't say anything, just stood there, watching me. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just lifted my hand in a soft wave, and he did the same. Then he faded, like breath on glass. Gone, but not lost. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because I knew the world may never know who Noah was, may never believe what came to my house that stormy week, and I'd buried not just a boy, but the weight he carried, not in shame, in honor. The earth held him now, and I held the memory. Some things deserve to rest in peace, and some things deserve to bloom. Summer came, long and golden, with the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer above the roads. The daffodils finally faded, but they didn't vanish. Their leaves remained green well past their season, like they were waiting for something, or someone. I went about my life. I planted tomatoes. I restocked the pantry. I even started going to bridge again. Doris March still accused me of sandbagging, and I let her. But every now and then, the world would shift, a flicker on the edge of my vision, a breeze that carried the faintest sound of laughter when no one was around, a light tap on the porch steps when I knew no one had knocked. And once, just after sunset, the radio turned on by itself. Then, soft and low, music, a lullaby I didn't recognize but felt like I should. I stood still in the kitchen, not afraid, just listening, my hands in the dishwater, eyes fixed on the old dial. Then, as suddenly as it came, it faded. The room felt warmer after that, like something had visited. I never told anyone, not about the music, the boy, the shadows, or the locket. What could I say? That a child arrived during a storm and saved the world by dying quietly beneath my daffodils? No. This wasn't a story for the world, it was a story for me, for us. But people did start talking, started showing up at the library on Thursdays, asking about ancient folklore and old world myths.